What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Vladimir Putin's most recent visit to a nuclear submarine near Murmansk did more than celebrate a show of force. It signaled an uncompromising commitment to a battle defined by propaganda, bloodshed, and the deliberate silencing of dissent. He also said the words, and I'm literally quoting him, "We will push and finish off the enemies of Russia." At first you might think he referred to Ukrainians. Yes, right? But there was no typical addition of words such as Nazis, Western puppeteers, liberals and banderovцы, as he usually does in his speeches whenever talking about Ukraine as the main enemy of Russia. Not this time. His reference to an enemy of Russia was very vague and open to interpretation, and the events that followed, that we will also discuss in today's episode, will make it just a little bit more clear that a new enemy of Russia is one from within. In late March, the Russian leader stepped aboard a nuclear submarine docked in the icy port city of Murmansk, a site that stands as both technological marvel and a testament to the nation's military ambitions in the Arctic. The visit was no routine inspection, it was a statement. During his speech, Putin certainly dismissed any notion of negotiating a ceasefire or even entertaining peace talks with Ukraine. Who would have thought, right? Even though we will not be surprised if the next time there is a communication between Trump and Putin, or at least their representatives, Putin will say once again that Russia never declined peace talks, it as well as Ukraine, who refused to negotiate the ceasefire. Anyways, in this impassioned address, he scolded Ukraine's leadership as illegitimate, framing any possibility of reconciliation as a sham, against the backdrop of what he deemed a triumphant military effort. There was unmistakable fervor in his denunciation, as though the very concept of compromise has been exorcised from his vocabulary. Instead, the tone was set for an all-out continuation of hostilities, with the explicit vow to finish off the Ukrainian armed forces, or that's what it seemed like he was referring to in the last couple of weeks. Until we started to dig deeper and hear more statements and cries from both the Russian soldiers on the front lines and their commanders. Behind the veneer of a resolute defiance, however, lay an administration increasingly desperate to salvage a narrative that paints Russia's war effort as a righteous crusade, even as the true human costs mount literally every single day. The propaganda machine roared to life with renewed effort. State media began to cast the battlefield as a proving ground where every victory is a step towards an unimaginable triumph. Yet when one takes a step back to gaze at the historic and strategic map, the contrast becomes too obvious. The intense rhetoric of war is nowhere near close to the real situation along the front lines, and supposed advancements of the Russian military are non-existent, to say the least. The only notable military gain in recent months is the elimination of a vital Ukrainian bridgehead in Kursk, which now seems less emblematic of a war of attrition and more of a desperate grasp at a preceding dream. And honestly, Russians needed to retake this part of Kursk region way more than Ukrainians needed to hold it. It provided absolutely no strategic advantage to neither party. The capture was done purely out of the propagandistic reasons, and once it served its main purpose, the defending of Kursk became irrelevant to Ukrainians. I mean, why would they defend it? Why? They don't even need it. Though it still remained mandatory for Russians to take it back. Because how can you lose a part of your land when your goal was to protect Russian speakers in Ukraine? Absolute nonsense. These questions do not fit the state's propaganda, and that's why the root cause problem just had to be eliminated. However, another issue emerged recently, more of an internal nature, the one that is being dealt with right now by the Russian military commanders, and we will talk about it in more details, guys, very soon. A quick look at the operational theater reveals a complicated mosaic of embattled landscapes that tell a story of stalemate and shifting fortunes. In cities such as Chasiv Yar, the echoes of sustained conflict remind us that while propaganda advances a tale of swift victories, the reality on the ground is pictured by prolonged and bitter struggle. The scenes in Pokrovsk, another city, where the line between static positions and brutal offensives blurs, serve as a painful reminder that even minor territorial gains are bought at the cost of incalculable human suffering. Tens of thousands to be specific. For places on map that 99% of Russians will not even be able to find without using the magnifying glass. In the chaos of the modern battlefield, long-standing conflicts take on new dimensions. The operation of the next city, Vovchansk, for example, has devolved into a grim affair. Here, the city, once a quiet settlement, now finds itself the center of an unrelenting campaign where death and destruction have swallowed up its pre-war identity. All for a settlement with a pre-war population of 17,000 people. And now, only 300 estimatedly remain. Every contested trench and every ravaged district reflects a war that has degenerated into endless cycles of minor victories and crushing losses. With each territorial skirmish, the ambiguity of the enemy intensifies. One cannot help but wonder if the relentless focus to finish off the Ukrainian forces might be a pretext for a broader agenda. One that sacrifices not only enemy lives, but also the fabric of communities in a landscape already scarred by relentless bombardment. But at the same time, the people of Russia finally started questioning the necessity and justification of such enormous losses. Bakhmut and Avdiivka were hugely successful PR campaigns for the Russian propaganda, yet they were quickly forgotten as quickly as within weeks. Then came Chasiv Yar, Pokrovsk, Vovchansk, and most recently Bilohirivka. The losses skyrocketed, but the propaganda machine was not able to match the reality and expectations of the people. So inevitably, questions started to arise. Why and what are we even doing there? Questions that the regime of Putin most certainly did not want to answer. And just like that, a new, internal enemy was silently created. For every boast aired from the halls of power, there is a grim ledger that marks the cost with the names of those lost. Recent assessments by independent media outlets have placed Russia's death toll at an alarming milestone, a figure that now certainly exceeds 100,000 people, with an additional 10,000 potential eliminations in the processing queue. And these are just confirmed eliminations. Because then there are some more lists, specifically presented to us by the Western military analysts and Ukrainian armed forces. The ones that claim that the total number of losses, injuries and missing Russian soldiers climbs steadily to a 1 million mark. 936,160 as the April 15, 2025 to be specific. With the youngest confirmed elimination being the boy for Chelyabinsk, Russia, born in just 2007. Tens of thousands were identified as mobilized recruits, many of whom barely passed the threshold of adulthood when they were thrust into a war they never volunteered for. Just in general, a substantial number of those claimed by the conflict are young men whose dreams were sacrificed at the altar of campaign that spares absolutely no one. Then there is also a fate of countless others, who instead of appearing on any official register of the dead, have simply vanished, very convenient for the Russian propaganda. A silent epidemic of so-called missing people that robs families of both closure and remembrance. For the loved ones left behind, the prospect of searching through bureaucratic mazes for the slightest hints of truth or demanding that the state formally recognizes their absence is a very long, unending nightmare. The very structures meant to provide accountability instead ensnare these families in a quagmire of indifference. In the absence of timely updates, relatives are forced to choose between clinging to a desperate hope or engaging in prolonged legal battles for acknowledgement and reparation. Behind every missing names lies a narrative of lives interrupted, a collective grief that sees family after family forced to confront an unambiguous fate. Amid this sprawling narrative of war, one unit has emerged from the smoke and mirrors of military mobilization as a symbol of a regime's exploitation and cruelty. Unit 40321, home to the 7th Independent Guards Motor Rifle Brigade. The dark reputation of this specific unit is not simply a matter of its assigned numbers or its storied past. It is entrenched in the stark realities experienced by those who, compelled by circumstances and coercion, found themselves added to its ranks. Here, the experience of forced conscription takes on a new, absolutely new level of horror, one marked by the deception, coercion, and the utter dehumanization of soldiers. Stories emerging from this Unit 40-321 have ignited a collective outcry. Social media channels and independent platforms have been flooded with urgent messages and harrowing video pleas from the families of conscripts, each message talking about abuses that are as systemic as they're brutal. Soldiers speak in hushed tones of commanders who seize personal belongings, phones, and bank cards to stifle any attempt at communication or escape. The most notorious of them being a Russian officer under the code name Belly. Stories of him emerged where he simply took some guys out of the bunker to talk and just simply nullified them in the back for refusing to give them their monthly salaries of like $300. Just like that. The relatives of those unfortunate ones were notified that the relatives are either missing or just went AWOL. The personal toll is compounded by an atmosphere of pervasive fear, where even the slightest act of resistance can lead to swift retribution. Instead of finding camaraderie on the battlefield, many recruits have now found themselves caught in an inescapable vortex of blackmail, devastation, and humiliation, a process that leaves little room for dignity or hope. They thought their main enemy was in front of them, when equally ruthless opponent was right behind their backs. And you would thought that such stories would get publicity and force a response from the government, either Putin himself or the Ministry of Defense of Russia at least. But no, such stories do not fit in the narrative of camaraderie, brotherhood, and common goals that propaganda tries so hard, so tirelessly to convey to the people of Russia. So after thinking probably for no more than 15 minutes, the decision to fight against the soldiers themselves, specifically of Unit 40-321, was made. After all, if there are no people to talk about the atrocities of this unit, well then the atrocities never happened in the first place, right? That's the mindset of the Russian military leadership. If a tree falls in the forest and there is no one to hear it fall, does it even make the sound? As a result of all these stories, specifically again about this Unit 40-321, which we are certain is not the only Russian unit in Ukraine that practices such horrors, a new internal enemy emerged in Russia, that Putin and his cronies are trying so hard to fight against. And these are the soldiers of Russia who dare to complain about their misfortunes and spread fake news about their comrades being nullified for similar missteps. The regime can control the information outside of Russia and present only those things they deem worthy for Russian eyes and ears. Controlling the information flow inside of the country is a little bit more complicated, but, as you can see, not impossible. And just like that, Putin waged another silent and invisible war against his own soldiers. The descent is completely unacceptable, especially if it endangers his most precious thing in the world right now, the invasion of Ukraine. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below. You can buy our The Russian Dude merch, for example, at therussiandude.com. It is a very big help for our work. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.